Are you a leader and you're trying to lead your team, department, or organization through some change? Maybe you're trying to initiate a change because you want to stay competitive in this constantly changing and global environment. Or maybe it's some external change that you are being forced to deal with, and you have to navigate that with your people. And yet, you may have some employees there who have been there a long time and are very set in their ways and just resisting. Well, if so, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Avish Parashar. I'm a professional speaker, and for 30 years I've performed improv comedy, and for the last 20 plus I've been using improv as a tool to help individuals and organizations be more innovative and creative, communicate more effectively, and yes, get out of their own way, get unstuck from their own ways, and say yes and to embracing change. And I see this all the time in my work as a speaker. Whenever I speak beforehand, I will have a call with my client and maybe a few other people who really know the industry and the group, and we'll talk about challenges. And in almost every one of the calls, they will say, well, we have some people who've been here a long time, been in our company a long time, been in our association a long time, and they're very stuck in their ways. So anytime we try to come up with a new idea or broach a new way of doing things, they get very, very resistant. And this is very common simply because people don't like change. And the longer you've been doing things a certain way, the more of a habit and routine you have, the less willing you are to accept change, the more set in your ways you become. I've seen this before in a variety of ways, a variety of the clients I've been called into. It could be technology, that the organization is moving to like paperless or more cloud-based, and people are like, I like doing things the old way, so they're unwilling to embrace it. It could be just simply new systems and routines, like you've got a company that's growing, so they need to change things, but you've got the employees that have been there from back when it was a very small company, and they're like, listen, I've been here a long time, this is not the way we do things, so they are resisting. And it could also be maybe you are a leader who's new to this team, and you are trying to really bring your experience and ways of doing things that you know will make things better for everyone, the company and the employees, but they've been there a long time, and they're like, nope, this is not the way. Some new person is going to come here and tell me what to do. Whatever the specific change is, you as a leader need them or want them to change, and you've got these people that are set in their ways, and that can be exhausting. Now, let me let you in on the secret as to why you're struggling so much. It's because you are probably smart, logical, and reasonable, which means you are approaching trying to get them to change by using your intelligence, reason, and logic. But I think you'd agree that people are often not smart, logical, and reasonable, right? They're often irrational, emotional, confounding decision makers. And the more you throw logic and reason at them, the more they're simply going to resist, right? Resisting change, being set in your ways, these are emotional responses. These aren't logical, reasonable responses. And so when you approach it by trying to address the logic and the reason, you're going to fail, because all the logic and the reason in the world will not get them to shift at an emotional level. In fact, logic and reason is just going to make them dig their heels in even more, so you're working contrary to the purpose you're trying to achieve. This is why in my speaking programs, I talk about the importance of thinking not just informationally with all that great logic and reason and information, but also improvisationally. There are ways you approach improv comedy with a thought process that is different than the standard logic and reason you might use. This is why it is so hard for some people to perform improv comedy, because they're used to thinking in a certain way with logic and reason around everything. And to be successful in improv, you need to actually let go a lot of that and be more in the moment, creative, use emotion, and move forward that way. And when you can bring this same improvisational, yes and thinking mindset in your communication with people, especially those who are set in their ways, it's going to help you break down those barriers and get them moving forward and embracing the change you need them to embrace. Now, this is not a magic wand. You're not going to do this once and suddenly everyone's going to be on board. But even those people that you in your mind are thinking they are going to never agree to this, it's going to start moving the ball forward even for them, even if you're busy and even if you're kind of at your wit's end about this. Here's 3 ways you can start doing this, and they all come from my work applying improv to business and life, and specifically around the idea of using yes and instead of yes but. If you want more information on that, be sure to visit my website and watch one of my videos where I talk about what yes and is and isn't and how you can use it. Number 1, You have to approach the employee who's set in their ways in a way that doesn't trigger their defensiveness. This is a big piece of it. That yes but set in their ways response is a triggering response. It's an emotional response, and it's often based in defensiveness. And so the minute you approach them with your own yes buts, when they give some objection to the change you're proposing, and you respond with a yes but, it's going to trigger their defensiveness, and they're going to come back with you with a yes but, which is going to make them dig their heels in more. So this is why in my keynotes and programs, we talk so much about defaulting with a yes and. When you get that response from that set in their ways employee, don't come back with your logic. Don't come back with your own yes but. You need to respond to them with a yes and. Your goal here is to create a sense of connection, empathy, and understanding. So respond with a yes and. Acknowledge what they're saying as their objection. Even if in your mind your initial thought is that is dumb or it doesn't matter because we have to change anyways, start by understanding them. Yeah, and tell me more about that. Yes, and why are you feeling that way? Yes, and how do you see this working? Right? You're giving them a platform. You're letting them voice their opinion. Now, if they've been there a long time and you're new to that group or team, one of the biggest underlying things they have is that they're going to feel like you're this newbie coming in and they've got all the institutional experience and knowledge. So by saying yes and, you're acknowledging that, right? You're almost playing to their ego a little bit. Now, this is not just lip service. You got to really be there and listen to it. But this is a great way to kind of undermine that defensiveness, right? To undercut it. You don't trigger their defensive response. You get them talking. You get them engaging and connecting. Number 2, you need to understand and address their feelings before you jump to logic and reason. Now, I know this might sound unpopular because I feel like if you're like me, I'm 50 now at the time of this recording, and I have for years in business heard the message that emotions don't matter. Feelings don't matter. It doesn't matter how you feel, just do the work. And so you might feel that way. You might be carrying that in with you to these interactions. So if you've got an employee set in their ways, they're going to be feeling uncertain or afraid or overwhelmed. And that's one of the reasons they're digging their heels in and being set in their ways. Now, what you want to say to them, what you feel you want to say to them, is your feelings don't matter. I don't care if you don't want this change. I don't care how you feel about it. You got to just do it because I'm the boss. This is what the organization demands. This is how things are. Who cares about your feelings? Now, that may be a nice sort of idea to have in your head, but in the real world, feelings do matter. And if you really care about getting these people on your side and changing the resistance they have, you got to address their feelings. This is why one of the big points in my keynotes is about understanding emotions, right? I do this improv game where I show how you feel drives your content. And there's an improv game called Emotional Lists where every time you're going in a scene and periodically someone will call out an emotion and you have to immediately take on that emotion. And it is amazing how that drives the direction of the scene. And then this becomes very instructive about how we feel drives what we think and what we say and what we do. So if you want the people to change what they say, what they think, and what they do, you need to address their underlying emotion. Now, you can't do this by saying, oh, I can see you're feeling very afraid. That's going to make them dig their heels in. This takes more finesse and nuance. But this is where you use yes and, right? By digging deeper into their feelings about the change. Ask them, what are you thinking about this change? How do you see this working? What are your concerns? You dig deeper. And so then you can figure out where's this feeling coming from? Why are they afraid? Why are they uncertain? And then start addressing that. And yeah, at some point you need to say yes, but, or to counter them. But a lot of it is timing. And by starting with a yes and digging deeper, you may be able to uncover what's that real thing they're worried about or afraid about or stressed about. And then by addressing that issue, like, oh, here's why that won't be a problem. If you do it first, triggers defensive response. If you dig deeper, connect, and find out what the emotion is, then they'll be much more receptive to it. Number 3, and this will be the hardest for many people, talk less, listen more. This is very much the yes and versus yes but mindset. See, as a leader, you probably feel in a lot of ways like you have information, you have answers, and you may want to provide that information and answers to people because you're helping. It's your job and you want to help them. So when someone has a question or concern about how things will go, or raises an objection, or even has a suggestion about something, you might feel the urge to say, yeah, but let me share with you my experience and my information of what I know. And you'll think you're helping. You'll think you're being efficient because you're like, why should we bother talking about what you're talking about if you're wrong? The problem with that is That's going to trigger that defensive response. Your set in the way employee will be even more set in their ways. This is why you are much better off asking their questions, getting their input, and then just being quiet. Because when they respond, you're going to have a little trigger in your mind where you're going to want to respond to what they say. And if you can control that, if you can just keep your mouth shut and listen, so often the person will talk themselves out. They will talk, they will share their feelings, they will eventually get to a point where they'll saying, yeah, okay, fine, I see what you're saying. Now, you may not even say anything, but if you let them talk, see, here's the thing. Most people, I said they're not logical and reasonable. They're not logical and reasonable at first. But deep down, even the most set in their way employees, even the most change resistant employees, they understand the real world and reality. And they know that if your whole organization is rolling out a new software system or process, that they're going to eventually have to change. If you push it upon them, they'll resist. If you just ask them a question about it and let them talk, they might eventually get to a point and be like, look, I know that we need to do this change. I'm just concerned. Now, if throughout their talking at any point you interrupt them or even jump in when they pause and say, yeah, but here's why you're wrong, it's going to start the whole cycle over again. So it's an interesting idea from the world of improv, and I talk about this in some of my workshops. It's this idea of just being present and in the moment and keeping your mind shut and just almost being an empty receptacle for what they're saying. Now, eventually, they're going to ask you a question, or they're going to stop and pause, not where they're pausing and still thinking, but pausing and then turning it over to you as your turn. Then, sure, you can speak. And if you can ask a follow-up question, that's even better. But the less you talk and the more you listen, the greater rapport you're going to build, the more you're going to lower that change resistance, even to the most set in their ways employee. So those are 3 ways you can start using the improv idea of yes and to start lowering resistance, getting those set in their ways employees to start embracing the change that you know is going to be so important, so useful, and so valuable. There's no magic wand, but if you start using it right away, you'll see some progress happen. And if you found this information helpful and valuable, please subscribe and give me a like. And if you are trying to lead your team through a change and you want your other leaders to be more effective in addressing the employees who are set in their ways, or if you want someone to come in and talk to your employees, even the ones who are set in their ways, and use some of these techniques to help lower that resistance in that direction, please reach out to me. You can visit my website or just contact me directly. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I hear from you soon.